Welcome to Declassified Deep Dive, where unredacted files reveal hidden truths. Let's uncover the secrets. I'm your host, Raj, and each week we explore a new secret deep dive.
All right, get ready because today we're going deep on Operation Paperclip.
Oh, yes.
This is the U.S. program that brought Nazi scientists to America.
Right, after World War II.
After World War II.
Yep.
And we've got a lot of sources to dig into today. We've got excerpts from books, articles, even some YouTube videos. We're going to hear from some experts, historians, even some folks whose lives were directly impacted by this operation.
Yeah, it's a wild story. I mean, it reads like a spy thriller, but it also raises some seriously complex moral and ethical questions.
Absolutely.
The backdrop for all of this is post-World War II. You've got this scramble for German scientific expertise, and the U.S. and the Soviet Union are locked in this race to grab the best and brightest minds.
Yeah, and there was a lot of fear in the U.S. that the Soviets would get a hold of these Nazi scientists and their research first.
Exactly.
And gain an edge in the Cold War, which was just starting to ramp up at this point.
Right. And I mean, and not just, any edge, an edge in a potential nuclear arms race, right?
Right.
I mean, this is serious stuff.
Yeah, really high stakes.
Very high stakes, yeah. So you've got agencies like the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, the JIOA,
Okay.
and the Office of Strategic Services. That's the precursor to the CIA.
Right.
They were both really instrumental in creating Operation Paperclip. Their mission was pretty clear: secure as much scientific and technological knowledge as they possibly could from the collapsing Third Reich, before the Soviets got to it.
Yeah, so they were really in a hurry. But it's not like, the U.S. was just totally okay with welcoming, former Nazis with open arms. I mean, even President Truman, at first, he opposed the idea of bringing in these, ardent Nazis into the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. Truman understood the moral implications here, right? But a lot of intelligence officials, driven by these Cold War anxieties that we were just talking about, they found ways to work around his directive, right?
Yeah. How'd they do that?
Well, they used something they called file purification.
File purification.
Right. So they essentially scrubbed clean any evidence of Nazi affiliations from the scientists' files.
So they were literally rewriting history to make these guys look better.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty blatant, and it really begs the question, how far are we willing to compromise our values, in exchange for security?
And it makes you wonder, like, were they really able to get everything? Did they miss anything? Or were there things they intentionally left out?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for sure, right? But it definitely raises a lot of questions about the information that we might be, missing or that might have been manipulated, to fit a particular narrative.
Yeah, for sure. And it gets even more complicated when you look at figures like Wernher von Braun.
Oh, yeah, von Braun.
So he was the mastermind behind the U.S. space program.
Right, the head of NASA.
Right,
Yeah.
but he also had this, this really dark past.
Yeah, very, very complicated history. I mean, von Braun, he was instrumental in getting the U.S. to the moon. I mean, that's undeniable.
Yeah.
But he also, on the other hand, he ran this brutal rocket factory in Germany during the war. I mean, we're talking forced labor.
Wow.
Terrible conditions, public hangings of Jewish workers who couldn't keep up with the production demands.
That's just horrifying. I mean, how could someone be involved in something like that and then go on to, achieve these incredible things, these scientific breakthroughs?
Right. And it's a question that continues to be debated today, right?
Yeah.
The Simon Wiesenthal Center, which is an organization that's dedicated to, hunting down Nazi war criminals.
Right.
They've stated that they would have prosecuted von Braun for crimes against humanity if he were alive today. So it really forces us to confront this uncomfortable truth, right? That the guy who helped us, reach for the stars also had a lot of blood on his hands.
It's really hard to wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
And it's not just about von Braun. You look at Mittelbau-Dora.
Right.
So that was the slave labor camp where he and other scientists, developed their rockets.
Mm-hmm.
And thousands of people died there. They were subjected to inhumane treatment.
Right. And those public hangings, they were a form of terror, right?
Yeah.
Meant to frighten the other workers into submission.
Wow. One of the sources that I read describes this really powerful encounter between an author who was researching Operation Paperclip
Yeah.
and the wife of a Middle Baldora survivor. And it really drives home the point that, behind all of this, these technological advancements and Cold War maneuvering, there were real people whose lives were just shattered by this program.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder that we can't just focus on the rockets and the technology that came out of Operation Paperclip without also acknowledging the terrible human cost, right?
Right. So we've got these rocket scientists with, blood on their hands, but it doesn't stop there.
No, it goes much deeper than that.
What about the Nazi doctors?
Ah, yes. The medical side of Operation Paperclip.
Yeah.
It's often overshadowed by the rocketry part, but it's equally disturbing, you know. For example, you've got Dr. Hubertus Strughold, who's hailed as the father of space medicine.
Okay, but didn't he perform all these horrific medical experiments? I mean, that's kind of hard to square with all those accolades later on.
Yeah. I mean, Strughold, he conducted these gruesome experiments on prisoners at Dachau.
Really?
Yeah. He was obsessed with understanding the effects of high altitude and extreme conditions on the human body, right? So he conducted all these experiments, simulating high altitude conditions. He was forcing prisoners to drink seawater, subjecting them to freezing temperatures.
Wow.
Often with fatal results.
It's hard to imagine that someone capable of doing those kinds of things could go on to be, praised for his work in the scientific community.
I know. It's really unsettling, right? But I think it speaks to the compromises that were made during this period. Strughold, he went on to live this, very comfortable life in Texas, lauded for his work with NASA, while the memories of his victims were largely, forgotten.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, how much did we really know about these people that we embraced as scientific pioneers?
Yeah, it's a good question.
And speaking of, ethically questionable decisions, the U.S. didn't just, limit their recruitment to scientists and doctors. Right?
Oh, they did not.
They went even further. They employed Nazi spies.
They did, yeah.
And the CIA, the FBI, other agencies saw these spies as valuable assets in the Cold War.
Yeah.
Because of their intense hatred for the Soviets.
Exactly. I mean, the thinking was that, these Nazis had a score to settle, right? Yeah. And they could be used to gather intelligence on the Soviets.
So it wasn't just about, getting their technology. It was about weaponizing their animosity.
Right.
But if they were so desperate for intelligence, did these Nazi spies actually deliver?
Well, that's the ironic part. A lot of the information that they provided turned out to be worthless or even fabricated. I mean, there's this one story about a Nazi spy who lost a suitcase full of top secret documents.
Okay.
He accidentally swapped it with a bag containing pajamas and a shaving kit. Oh. Yeah, so it was a pretty farcical situation, But it also underscores, I think, the level of risk and the potential for things to go very wrong with this strategy.
Yeah, it's a crazy story. But what's really interesting is the lasting impact that Operation Paperclip had, not just on American science and technology, but on the entire global landscape.
Oh, yeah.
So what were some of the ripple effects of this operation?
Well, you could say that Operation Paperclip really, helped shape the world that we live in today. It wasn't just about acquiring Nazi technology. It was about absorbing their knowledge, building upon it, shaping the future.
So these scientists, these guys with, these tainted pasts, they actually contributed to advancements that we take for granted today.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about jet aviation, synthetic fuel, infrared technology, guided missiles.
Wow.
All of these were influenced to some degree by the knowledge and expertise that was brought in through Operation Paperclip.
That's a pretty big legacy.
Yeah.
But didn't all of this scientific progress that you're talking about, didn't that also fuel the arms race between the U.S. and the Soviet Union?
Oh, it absolutely did. And that leads to, one of the most profound and kind of paradoxical consequences of Operation Paperclip.
Yeah.
It's unintentional contribution to world peace.
We won.
Yeah, it's strange to think about, right? But hear me out. So you have, both the U.S. and the Soviet Union, fueled by the knowledge that they've acquired through programs like Operation Paperclip, they're developing these increasingly devastating nuclear arsenals, right? And so The potential consequences of a direct conflict between those two superpowers, they become so horrific, so unthinkable that it acts as a deterrent.
So the fear of basically total annihilation
Yeah.
forced both sides to find other ways to compete.
Exactly. And those other ways, they involve proxy wars, they involved espionage, but crucially, they never escalated into a full-blown global conflict.
That's pretty mind-blowing. So Operation Paperclip had a hand in both, escalating and mitigating global conflict during the Cold War.
Yeah, it's this tangled web of unintended consequences,
Yeah.
and it really challenges, I think, our understanding of history and raises questions about, the ethical implications of scientific advancement, especially when it's so closely tied to political maneuvering.
This has been a lot to unpack so far. Before we move on to talking about the ethical debates and the lasting implications of this, I'm curious, what's really stood out to you the most about Operation Paperclip?
That's a tough one. I think what I find most compelling is how this program forces us to confront these really uncomfortable realities of history. It's easy to view the past, through this kind of simplistic lens of good versus evil, but Operation Paperclip shows us that even in the darkest of times, there are shades of gray.
Yeah.
There are moral ambiguities and unintended outcomes that just defy easy categorization.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it compels us to really ask ourselves, at what cost do we pursue progress,
Right.
or security? Where do we draw the line when it comes to compromising our values?
That's a really powerful thought. And I think it's a good place to leave it for now as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive into Operation Paperclip. It seems like this story raises more questions than answers, but I have a feeling we're going to unearth even more complexities and contradictions as we continue our exploration.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much more to unpack here. Join us for part 2, where we'll delve further into those ethical debates surrounding Operation Paperclip, and we'll examine the attempts or lack thereof to hold these scientists accountable for their actions.